Good morning, Wayne. Thank you for joining me this morning for Coffee with Climate Leaders. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
It is my pleasure.
Thank you. And you are in Pittsburgh, and I am still in my dining room in Los Angeles. It's great to connect with you this way. It's been a few years since I saw you at the last Climate Leadership Conference, but it's great to be able to touch base again. So how has COVID-19 affected IBM's ability to move ahead on their sustainability initiatives and their climate action plans?
Sure. So, I would say in general, Amy, that persistence and determination are really what's essential, and a long-term outlook. So I would say right at the outset that, the tragedy of this virus has not affected our intentions or our work on sustainability and climate change at all. And I do not foresee that it will. Climate isn't something you just focus upon when there's a crisis. IBM has been in business for 109 years, and I've been blessed to be at IBM for 37 of those years. So almost 1/3 of IBM's existence. And across all that time, we have seen numerous changes. We've seen changes in technology, countless ones. Every 10, 15 years, there's a major technological disruption. We've seen changes in the way business is done. We have seen changes in the way countries are governed around the world, and we've seen a ton of societal changes. So change is constant. And I think it's also important to recognize that the subject of environmental sustainability hasn't always been as popular over the last several decades as it has been for the last 10 to 15 years. So the reason that stuff matters is because if you're trying to continually pursue environmental leadership and leadership for climate, you have to be committed to doing this stuff, whether or not the business is successful in the short term, regardless of all these changes, and regardless of the topic's popularity. So you have to be doing it because it makes sense, regardless of disruptions that occur. Adaptability is probably the most important thing for all of us right now with the virus. Many think it's really important for climate. And the trick with adaptability is this, and we've learned this lesson. The trick for us as human beings is we have to be willing to adjust course whenever things are going perfectly well, not when there's a crisis already underway. And that's not easy for human beings to do, let alone large organizations. We could ask ourselves, how well have we as humans done that since the SARS virus of 2002? Maybe not well enough, we're finding out. So the trick is to be willing to change course when things are going pretty well, as opposed to when it's a crisis.
And do you have a sense, could you provide us with a sense of whether your colleagues, your other climate and sustainable leaders in the corporate sector have the same type of thinking on this? Or do you see any direction of kind of pulling back in terms of their efforts? And if so, why?
Yeah, I don't have any reason to think that anybody will pull back from this. At least the peer companies with which I would be familiar. I think one litmus test, however, you remember a litmus test from chemistry class? You put the paper in, depending on the color, it's acidic or it's base. I think there can be a litmus test. And the litmus test will be the things that last in terms of what companies do are things that always made sense, and they're things that had been integrated into the core of how the enterprise operates. And if something falls by the wayside, if it's not arguably an economic casualty, it might be a casualty of something that had never been integrated in the first place.
But what about new projects that they might be interested in investing in or participating in. Do you think some of those are at risk, some new and energy efficiency projects or new technology that they may be thinking of investing in? Is there a sense that, yes, there's going to be a market out there still for that, so we should still pursue those type of efforts?
Oh, I think there will certainly be a market for it. I think it would be realistic to wonder if many will need to conserve cash, at least until but just to be honest, until the uncertainty passes. I think most businesses now are focused on conserving cash. You know, the expression cash is king. So could decisions on new capital investment and new undertakings get deferred? Maybe for a little while, could be a number of months. Will they be abandoned and chucked by the wayside? No, not at all. I mean, if a company's been serious about this, it'll get to it. Could there be a temporary lull in the action? Far be it from me to say, but as companies conserve cash, that would be a reasonable thing to anticipate or expect. Do not worry about companies abandoning their commitment and their pledge, because this isn't something most of us just started in the last 3 to 5 years. Some have. And for them, I think their sincerity will carry the day. There may be a need to conserve cash in the short term, but the commitment to this climate issue is not going to fall by the wayside.
Well, that is really reassuring news, and I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. In terms of the economic recovery efforts from COVID, where there are resources and opportunities, what are some kinds of collaborations that you can envision between the private and the public sector that might really just ratchet up climate action and technological solutions and changes that can be implemented?
I think as far as climate goes, there's an opportunity between the business community and the NGO community to maybe get back to a little bit more facts and credibility and inspection, and a little less celebration of things that, in my personal opinion, have a little bit too much PR associated with it. So that's my orneriness for the day. Now.
Well, I'll second that orneriness. We actually just launched a carbon neutrality database project where we're going to be tracking pledges, from international pledges down to local governments, and showing the transparency of what those pathways are to get to those climate neutrality goals. And just focusing on 100% offsets is not enough. There needs to be more done. We need to be more creative about it, and that's part of the spectrum. But we need to move these entities along that spectrum to really.
Sure, I think transparency is critical. I've always said inside of IBM, I thought one of the most effective U.S. environmental statutes ever was the Sarah Title III amendments of 1986, which created the U.S. Toxics Release Inventory. And all it did was tell companies to disclose the emissions that were legally permitted to occur. Just that public disclosure changed behavior like never before. Mm-hmm. And so transparency is always a good thing. And if NGOs are starting to inspect these things like, I'm 100% renewable, it's a little bit long overdue, and you go for it. Now, with that said, back to public-private partnerships for solutions. One that I think matters a lot centers around data. So you may know in my industry, the IT industry, that all the talk is about technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, blockchain, analytics with AI, all these things. But the truth is there's no AI without IA. There's no artificial intelligence without information architecture. And information architecture means data. I think there's a lot of organizations around the world that have a lot of data. Those data need to be collected, organized, curated, after which the best IT tools in the toolbox can be applied to them to find new solutions to old intractable problems. I think there's an opportunity for public-private collaboration in that regard. In terms of policy, I think we're doing pretty well. I think there's a decent and growing amount of public-private collaboration there. In our case, policy-wise, we're a founding member of the Climate Leadership Council. We support their plan for a carbon tax with carbon dividend. We're on record with that. We'd love to see that bipartisan approach get enacted. So in terms of policy, companies and the public sector, government can collaborate on solutions to climate in terms of policy as well as technological solutions.
Wonderful. That's a very optimistic note to end on, and you're so kind of you to join me this morning or afternoon where you are. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with in terms of what gives you hope and inspires you during this very troubling time?
Oh, I think people are resilient, and make no mistake, this crisis is bad. We know that. But people are resilient, people are adaptable. I do think under lockdown, many people are rediscovering their connection to the natural world. I think that's fantastic. I would like for all of this to cause people to rediscover how much nature matters, to value it more. Maybe when they get up and walk around from their houses, they'll instinctively do that. They'll remember when they were a kid and they liked to walk out in the woods. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, explore, look at the trees, hear the birds, hear the spring peepers croaking away at night on their wetlands, whatever it is that floats your boat, rediscover the environment, and that can cause an increased appreciation for climate change. I think people can become more sympathetic toward climate change when they connect it to the entirety of the Earth's environment rather than as one piece of it. My opinion, for what it's worth.
I totally agree with you, and I also love the fact that cities are opening up their streets and turning them into pedestrian walkways, and I hope that's a trend that stays around.
Yeah, I mean, who grew up hoping, geez, I hope I grow up and live in the middle of urban sprawl? Okay, I don't recall that when I was building tree houses as a kid in the woods.
Well, thank you again, Wayne. I look forward to seeing you in the future when we can stand 6 feet apart and wave at each other or maybe elbow bump. That'll be a good day.
All righty. Thanks, Amy. I appreciate you asking me to speak with you this afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.